Good. My name is Troy. I'm one of the pastors here. Happy first summer hang of 2026 day. Yeah, so get ready. One of my favorite things that Brad shared about this was last night when he ordered the 250 hot dogs for today. And the ship guy said, enjoy your party. And Brad's like, oh, I just like hot dog. Hot dog singular, not hot dog plural. I think we just made it even better. But hopefully he shows up today, Brad. That'd be great if you got a chance to invite him. I'd love to meet that guy, and apologize on our behalf to him. But anyway, as many of you guys know professionally, I work in our judicial system here in town, and I work at the lower level court. It's often not super glamorous at all. We don't do the big fancy criminal trials that you see on TV or in your favorite Netflix documentary. The trials that we do are usually smaller. They're usually misdemeanor offenses, the cases that you just kind of roll your eyes over if you have to serve on this jury, and the ones that you really do try to get out of. And the really boring ones are often the non-criminal ones, or like civil cases as we tend to call them. And it's pretty funny hearing prospective jurors' reactions when they learn that that's what they are called in for, is like a contract dispute or a tree issue. But it does happen often, more often than you guys think. These cases are like mundane at best, right? There's no dramatic surveillance footage. There's no passionate lawyer who's defending their client. There is just the introduction of signed documents, the reading of fine print that no one reads when they click I acknowledge, and it's just all very meh, right? And we recently just had a multi-day trial involving an insurance claim. I wish I was joking, but it's true. We had a multi-day trial over insurance claims. These cases are not exciting. There's nothing that usually substantial that happens as a result of them. Someone's awarded money or property back. My favorite is when there's a dog involved and somebody gets the dog. It's crazy, right? But the case is closed and everybody kind of moves on with their lives. I think the reality of our culture today makes the events of our passage today, well, dramatic in a sense. Not dramatic in that things are being overblown, but they actually did matter in the grand scheme of things. A simple land transaction that we just heard, done legally, had massive implications of the trajectory of the world. And I think happened to some of the most unlikeliest of people. I think what I've enjoyed most in this series of Ruth that will wrap up today is this theme that God does not show favoritism in who or what he works through. Right, Brad touched on this a little bit this morning, but mainly last week, that what we do or what we do not do does not make us less worthy for God to use us for his glory. And we see that on display this morning. And so as we close this series, this book this morning, a question that I want you guys to be thinking throughout and kind of pondering over is, who is your Redeemer? Who is your Redeemer? So we're going to start in chapter 1, again, chapter 4, verse 1, where it says this. Boaz went to the gate of the town and sat down there. Soon the family redeemer Boaz had spoken about came by. Boaz said, come over and sit down. So he went over and sat down. And then Boaz took 10 men of the town's elders and said, sit here. And they sat down. He said, the Redeemer Naomi, who has returned from the territory of Moab, is selling the portion of the field that belonged to our brother Elimelech. I thought I should inform you, buy it back in the presence of those who are seated here and in the presence of the elders of my people. If you want to redeem it, do it. But if you don't want to redeem it, tell me so that I will know, because there isn't anyone other than you to redeem it, and I am next after you. I want to redeem it, he answered. Then Boaz said, on the day you buy the field from Naomi, you will acquire Ruth the Moabitess, the wife of the deceased man, to perpetuate the man's name on his property. The Redeemer replied, I can't redeem it myself, or I will ruin my own inheritance. Take my right of redemption, because I can't redeem it. At an earlier period in Israel, a man removed his sandal and gave it to the other party in order to make any matter legally binding concerning the right of redemption or the exchange of property. This was the method of legally binding a transaction in Israel. So the Redeemer removes his sandal and said to Boaz, buy back the property yourself. Boaz said to the elders and all the people, you are witnesses today that I am buying from Naomi everything that belonged to Elimelech, Kilion, and Mahlon. I also acquired Ruth the Moabitess, Mahlon's widow, as my wife, to perpetuate the deceased man's name on his property, so that his name will not disappear among his relatives or from the gate of his hometown. You are witnesses today." So again, on the surface, not exciting, right? Legally binding language by the world's strangest handshake, right? Of taking off a shoe and handing it to the other person. But we'll get into it why it's significant, but when you come across this, it just seems like a bunch of legalese. But if we remember last week, we saw Ruth come to Boaz and he asks him to be her family redeemer. And we've established this before early on in this book, that a redeemer is a male relative who, according to various laws, had the privilege or responsibility to act on the behalf of a relative who is in trouble or in danger or in need. We learned back in chapter 2 that Boaz was a relative of Naomi's husband's side and would have a path to being this family's redeemer. And so last week, remember, Ruth proposes this to Boaz and says, "Hey, I want you to redeem us." And Boaz shares a willingness to do this, but informs her that there is another relative, another redeemer who is first in line to take them as his own. He lets her know that he will arrive the next day, and if he chooses not to redeem them, then he will do so. And I think an overlooked detail in Boaz's exchange with Ruth in that moment is when he says, if he will redeem you, if this other guy will redeem you, if this other relative will redeem you, that's good. Their well-being, and we'll get into this a little bit more, but their well-being is most important to Boaz. That no matter whoever is the one redeeming them, that is good. So I just want to shout out Boaz for being a real one, honestly. But chapter 4 picks up immediately after this. So we see Boaz, he goes out to the city gates and he waits for this man to arrive, which was important because it was at the city gates that important business transactions were made. Court was convened, public announcements were made. If you wanted to do something officially, you went out to the city's gates to arrange it. So this relative comes by, he sits down with Boaz. Boaz gathers 10 of the city elders, brings them back with him. They all gather at the city's gate to have this formal proceeding, this formal court hearing, if you will, about redeeming Ruth and Naomi. And so Boaz follows the traditional order of how this would play out. This proceeding happens, he gathers all the appropriate parties and items required to make sure that this was done legally. And I think this continues to speak to the noble character that Boaz had, because he wanted to do this the right way, right? He didn't want to cut corners. He didn't want to try to sneak one past them or cheat his way into this. He wanted to do this right, respectfully, and honorably. He informs the other man of the Redeemer proposal and explains his intentions of, okay, if you don't want to do this, then I will. And the man says, okay, I want to do it. I want to redeem them. But it gets complicated, right? Boaz then informs them, okay, hey, if in doing so, not only would you get all of this, but you would have Naomi, and you would also take Ruth as your wife, in order that the land would remain in the family name, and that it would live on, that it wouldn't go away. And this causes him to change his mind. He's like, you know what? I think this is going to have some greater impacts on my own inheritance. I can't redeem this. I'm going to pass. I think there are a few different reasons as to why he could have changed his mind. First, it could have been that the man simply didn't want to spend the money to buy the land and then provide another marriage for Ruth, and as well as take care of Naomi. He could have been under the initial impression that this was just a land transaction only, which would have made it a little simpler for him. The added elements were just too much, so he decides to pass. Or it could have been the idea of that endangering his own estate or inheritance could mean that he felt this increased obligation of another spouse would further divide that inheritance and cause more harm to the people he was currently responsible for taking care of. He could have had this large family already, and adding more people under his wing maybe could have made things more scarce. It just wasn't ideal. Or perhaps he was just not simply as wealthy as Boaz was and didn't have the ability to pay for all of this. Because we know from learning about Boaz early on in this book, right, that he was very comfortable and he probably had the ability to follow through this deal. But whatever this reason is, the man decides that it's not wise for him to do this, and he decides to pass willingly to Boaz, who is happy to take this on. So Boaz declares in front of everybody, all the leaders gathered, all in front of this man, he says, I am going to redeem them. I'm going to take Ruth as my wife. I'm going to secure their family name as owning this land in the future. The name will live on. It will not disappear from generations. And they secure the deal again with the passing of a sandal. I think we get a great glimpse here into Boaz's continued faithfulness and trust in God's provision. I think it's safe to say that since their, meet cute, as Brad said, or their chance encounter a couple chapters ago, that he ultimately desired this. That Boaz wanted to redeem this family. That he wanted to be the redeemer, that he wanted to redeem Ruth and Naomi, that he took favor on them, that they meant a lot to him, and he wanted to follow through on this. And I think that further grew when Ruth asked him directly to do that too. And Boaz could have gone outside of his role. He could have bent the rules. He could have manipulated things in order for this to happen. He could have cheated the system in this court proceeding to get what he wanted. But he doesn't. He follows procedure. He trusts in the Lord's provision and was ultimately content with whatever outcome would have come from this. Because again, he tells Ruth prior to this man that, hey, if they redeem you, that is good. The outcome he desired over everything was that they would be redeemed, that they would be cared for, that the family name would continue to live on in this city. And he was content waiting for that process to play out the way it should. Compare that to today. I can't wait for anything, right? I think most of us struggle with having patience. It's easy to look for the easy way out sometimes, to ways to get around the red tape, to get the outcome that we desire. A stark contrast to Boaz when thinking about how things are today. Again, for me personally, the idea of sitting back and waiting for things to play out is daunting. If there's something that I desire, something that I want to happen as an outcome to the situation, I feel this overwhelming need to do something, to do everything in my power to achieve that outcome. Whether that's a work to do, a person to invest in, or being able to obtain something, that I struggle with the need to do enough to achieve that outcome. And it honestly causes great anxiety for me when I can't do that. Or if the opposite outcome happens, I'm guilt-ridden that, man, I didn't do enough to gain that outcome for myself or somebody else. I could have done more. If I would have spent a little bit more time or done this differently, then things would have shaked out the way that I wanted them to be. I think about last week again with Brad covering chapter 3, and I think often to myself, man, did I cause this? Is there something I did wrong to cause this? Is God angry with me? Maybe I do deserve this failure. Because what I've learned from Boaz's actions these last 4 weeks is that it's not that faithfulness leads to favor, but rather that faithfulness leads to calmness. I think about the calming presence that Boaz must have had throughout this entire process. The calming presence that he was to Ruth in the most chaotic days of her life. The calming presence that he was to all of those who worked for him, as they just had nothing but good things to say about him. The calmness in which he waited for this other male relative and then gathered everybody to be here in this moment. I can't help but think, man, how much calmer would I be if I just rested in the fact that God will provide? That God will provide the right people at the right time to fulfill his plan for our life, for my life. And how much rest could I have not worrying if I'm doing enough to make his will happen? God placed Boaz and Ruth in the same spot, not by chance, but by provision. He placed this other family redeemer, one who could not take this on because of the disruption it would cause in their long-term future. He would turn it down and allow Boaz to fulfill his promise to Ruth that he made previously. Church, the Lord will provide what you need in the moment you need it, and you probably will never see it coming. Who or what has God provided to you that maybe you need met in this moment? There are things that we can and do not have control over, and how beautiful a truth is that we serve a God who does have control over them and keeps his promises in providing for you. And they often happen in unexpected ways, and maybe ways that we're not anticipating or necessarily want, but they're perfect because he is perfect. And what also is true is how impactful those things can be in the long run, which is where we'll continue in verse 11. It says, all the people who were at the city gate, including the elders, said, we are witnesses. May the Lord make the woman who is entering your house like Rachel and Leah, who together built the house of Israel. May you be powerful in Ephrathah, and your name will be well known in Bethlehem. May your house become like the house of Perez, the son Tamar bore to Judah, because of the offspring the Lord will give you by this young woman. Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. He slept with her, and the Lord granted conception to her, and she gave birth to a son. The woman said to Naomi, blessed be the Lord, who has not left you without a family redeemer today. May his name be well known in Israel. He will renew your life and sustain you in your old age. Indeed, your daughter-in-law, who loves you and is better to you than 7 sons, has given birth to him. Naomi took the child, placed him on her lap, and became a mother to him. The neighbor woman said, a son has been born to Naomi, and they named him Obed. He was the father of Jesse, the father of David. So the set of elders, they acknowledge this deal as official, that it's been made proper, and they recognize Boaz as redeeming Ruth, Naomi, and their land. And they offer this blessing to him and Ruth. They say, may the Lord make Ruth like Rachel and Leah, who built the house of Israel. Yet if we remember in the book of Genesis, Rachel and Leah's marriage to Jacob helped establish the 12 tribes of Israel with the 12 sons that he had. So he says, may you be like Rachel and Leah, who had this house of Israel built. May you be powerful in Ephrathah, where Naomi's sons were from. May your name be known in Bethlehem too. May your house become like the house of Perez, the son Tamar bore to Judah, because of the offspring the Lord will give you by this young woman. Perez was the son of Tamar and Judah, who was born out of sinful and immoral circumstances, unfortunately, but God used that bloodline. He used that bloodline through Perez to bring his only son into his world, Jesus. And despite this controversy in which Perez was born, the family was well respected by the elders to be given praise like this and to be included in this blessing to Boaz and Ruth. Boaz and Ruth have that son who they name Obed. And after he is born, a neighbor of Naomi says to her, blessed be the Lord, Naomi, who has not left you without a family redeemer today. May his name be well known in Israel. Naomi, Obed will renew your life. He will sustain you in your old age. Ruth, who loves you, is better than 7 sons could ever be, has given birth to him. Naomi takes this child, places him on her lap, and becomes a mother to him. And our author, he finishes by providing that genealogy to David. He says, now there are the family records of Perez. Perez fathered Hezron. Hezron fathered Ram. Ram fathered Amminadab. Amminadab fathered Nahshon. Nahshon fathered Salmon. Salmon fathered Boaz. Boaz fathered Obed. Obed fathered Jesse. And Jesse fathered David. A direct line from Ruth to Boaz is drawn to Jesus because of this redemption. Which is, this idea of redemption is the big theme, I think, in this book. One that there's been some discussion ultimately about who the true redeemer of this story is. Some would say that Boaz is the ultimate redeemer here, right? Which is probably the most straightforward and literal answer, right? He's explicitly called this in chapter 2. He gathers witnesses. He officially takes on this role. Ruth asks him in chapter 3 to do this. But we do know that Boaz was comparatively older. And there's a lot of people who think about what is the likelihood of him to be able to provide for Ruth later in her life, which is alluded to here, that this woman, that Obed, would be the one to take care of Naomi and Ruth. So given his redemption was most likely temporary, could Boaz be the true redeemer of this story? Others would say that Ruth is the redeemer of the story, which would make sense, right? This is her book. It's the book of Ruth. Near the beginning of the book, Naomi is a poor widow. She is filled with bitterness, living in a foreign land, and when she decides to return to Bethlehem, she sends her daughters-in-law off to the back home of their families, but Ruth refuses. Right? She chooses to go with her and instead says to Naomi, where you go, I will go. Where you stay, I will stay. Your people are my people. Your God is my God. Right? Ruth sticks with Naomi, which makes her a strong candidate to be this redeemer. Because if it were not for her faithfulness, I think you could argue that Naomi would never have been redeemed in the first place. That she would never have gotten to experience being a grandmother to this child. Others would say Obed is the redeemer. Right? The neighboring woman of the city identifies him as Naomi's redeemer to her. After the death of Boaz, he would have been the only one to take care of Naomi and Ruth in their old age. He was more of a permanent person than Boaz could have been. And also, he's the grandfather of David, who again, God uses to direct that bloodline to Jesus. I think it's the mention of David at our story's end here that gives this significance. That this is not just a simple land transaction. This is more than that. But the last idea, and to me I think this is the one, is that the Lord is the true redeemer here. We know God is our ultimate redeemer. And one of my favorite things that we've talked about the last few weeks here is how that he is consistently working behind the scenes, and not only in this book, but in our lives. Because that famine that drove Naomi's family to Moab, where Ruth was, right? He was working there. God made certain that Ruth happened to come to the field of Boaz. God was at work with that law that was instituted that required a family redeemer to step up in the first place. God was at work with having that other person not being able to take this on so that Boaz would be the one to do it. God enabled Ruth to conceive, and through it all, that God's ultimate plan was to bring David into this world, continuing that line of Jesus so that we would have a Messiah. I think back to Naomi in chapter 1, when she told her sons' wives, "No, my daughters, my life is too much bitter for you to share because the Lord's hand has turned against me." Her husband died, her 2 sons died. Her grief and bitterness were real and frankly relatable. When her and Ruth first arrive in Bethlehem, there's excitement that they're there, and she immediately shuts it down. Right? She tells her, "Don't call me Naomi, because the Lord has made me bitter. He has made me empty, he has opposed me, he has humiliated me, he has afflicted me." And I have to imagine that in this moment of holding Obed on her lap, that she reflects on the time that has passed, that she reflects on those very real emotions that she felt. How she went from hopeless to being full of hope because of the Lord redeeming her and Ruth. How she went from this belief that she would never have a son in her life again to holding the child who would make Jesus' birth into this world possible. I think what we can ultimately learn from the book of Ruth, church, is that the Lord, again, is several steps ahead of us in the plan for our lives. As we have established, we can look back over the course of this story and see where God was working, driving them to Moab, placing Ruth in this field, allowing him to be their redeemer, giving this son to create that bloodline. And I imagine Naomi looking into Obed's eyes and thinking to herself, "Lord, how could I have ever doubted you?" The Lord provided the right people at the right time in the right place to provide for them what they needed. And the same God who did that for Ruth and Naomi is the same God who does that for you. So as we reflect on this book, maybe you walked in here this morning and you felt or feeling like chapter 1 Naomi. You're bitter, you're sad, you're angry, that maybe you were convinced that you did something to put you on God's bad side. Maybe you walked in here thinking that every bad thing that you've ever experienced recently is deserved because of something you did or failed to do. Maybe you feel like God's forgotten about you and has looked the other way. I would encourage you this morning that even if it does not feel like it, that God is actively working in your life. Right now in this moment. He's actively working in your redemption. He's actively working and placing the people or things around you to provide. So rest in that truth this morning. So as we close today, I want to circle back to that question. Who is your Redeemer? Who is your Redeemer? What or who are you trusting in to redeem your life? Is it success? Do you think having success in your personal life will allow you to feel this sense of calmness or security? That if you just had a little bit more, then all of your worries would go away? Is it relationships? Do you find yourself believing that this certain person in your life is the fix to your problems? A family member, a friend, someone you look up to or admire, that this person will redeem you and fix you and make it all better again? Is it yourself? Are you putting too much trust in yourself to be your own Redeemer? I know that's definitely mine. That if you work a little harder, if you become better in God's eyes, then you will finally be good enough. You will have earned it. If you finally conquered that specific sin in your life, then God will look on you with favor and redeem you. Do you find yourself struggling with that mentality? Or is your Redeemer Jesus? Have you fully surrendered to the true Redeemer of our lives? Have you allowed yourself to find rest in him and the providence that he will have for you? If you're worried about next week, God's already there. Next month, next year, God is already there. If you're grieving about something today, God is already working. If you're praying for an answer for something in your life, God isn't scrambling to figure it out. He will provide, and it's just on us to fully surrender ourselves, to trust that process. Pray with me this morning. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for who you are and all that you do for us. Lord, I thank you for the book of Ruth. Lord, I thank you for this story of redemption, Lord, and being able to look back and see where you were at work throughout this book. Lord, I pray as we go on our weeks, Lord, that we would be encouraged by your word. Lord, that we would be challenged to push ourselves to fully surrender to you, Lord, in who you are and the ways that you can provide to us, Lord. And no matter how we walked in this morning, Lord, that we would walk out of it just full of belief, Lord, that you will ultimately provide for us. For this in your name, amen. Now's the time of our service where our hospitality team is going to be passing around the red buckets, which is your opportunity to partner with us.